Hi, I'm Jeremy Salamon. I'm the chef and owner of Augie's Counter in Brooklyn, New York, and I'm here on Yes Chef. And today I'm making chilled buttermilk borscht out of my new cookbook, Second Generation. I picked this recipe because it's incredibly hot outside, it's refreshing, and it's a great way to enjoy the heat. Okay, so we're gonna start making the chilled buttermilk borscht, and of course we're gonna start with our beets, which you can grab from your local grocery store or your farmer's market. You can either use golden beets or red beets, candy cane beets, whatever you would like. This recipe will take it and adapt to it. But I'm gonna go ahead, and you can actually just pull off the tops. And for the beet tops, you can save those actually. You can cook them down with some garlic and onion, put a piece of breakfast sausage on top of it, or even candy them and make them into like a jam, a beet top jam. I have a love for beets. I actually have a tattoo of it on my arm. Beets are incredibly versatile. They can be used in both savory and sweet applications. And for the buttermilk borscht, it just felt like an approachable but an unusual way to see beets featured, because I think everybody knows borscht as a hot dish. And this is a great way to utilize beets in a really hot summer setting. I started working on the cookbook about 7 years ago, and when I felt like there really wasn't a chance of it getting published, I decided to do what I did know how to do, and that was restaurants. So I decided to create Augie's Counter based off the book, and the concept of reintroducing a grand Eastern European cafe in a second generation, modern day New York setting. So I've gone ahead and I've peeled my beets. I've also cut them in half or into quarters depending on the size. You'll want to go smaller cut if possible, just because of cooking time. Beets tend to take a while to cook, so the smaller they are, the faster they will. A really great tip is to put down either a kitchen rag or some parchment paper so you don't stain your board or your cutting surface. As you can see, I've already done it to my hands. Feel free to wear gloves, but this should come out in about a day. So the next step, I'm gonna go ahead and mince up my shallot, and then we'll get everything into the pot. Yeah, Augie's Counter was my very first restaurant. It's my baby. It was a terrifying experience to open up Augie's Counter. Things broke, they shattered, people didn't show up. But at the end of the day, it turned into a really beautiful place, and I'm really happy about that. When I opened up Augie's, a lot of people told me that it was an unusual idea to bring back Eastern European or Hungarian food, which I felt wholly ironic because New York City is kind of built on that in a sense, and many other cultures as well. So I wanted to find a way to reintroduce it, and that felt very natural to me. So while everyone said no, I kept pushing forward. With the shallot, you really don't have to be mindful about how you're cutting it or what size. It's natural for me to just chop it up or mince it. You could even do whole pieces if you'd like. Just make sure you obviously peel it, take the root off, but you can also slice it lengthwise, whatever you would like. Practice your cutting skills. It's all gonna get blended up anyways, so it doesn't really matter. Okay, so now that we have our chopping out of the way, we've got our beets and our shallots, we're gonna go ahead and add it to the pot with all the other ingredients, and that's why I love this recipe. It's a one-pot wonder. Go ahead, put all the rest of my ingredients in. So my shallots, some granulated sugar, I've got bay leaf, I also have some garlic cloves. You can go ahead, you can peel it and mince it, but I just like to give it a whack on the cutting board. And you can throw those in there whole as well. We can pull those out later. And then we also are gonna throw in our red wine vinegar. I'm gonna go ahead and put in some salt as well, season it, and a little bit of olive oil. All right, so we can go ahead and fill our pot up with water now. We wanna put in about enough water to cover the beets. We filled our pot, and we're gonna go ahead and put it on a high flame. And we're gonna wait for our beets to come up to a complete boil, and then we'll lower it down to a simmer and let the beets and shallots cook until they're incredibly tender. Don't worry about overcooking the beets, that's not a thing here. And after that, we'll go ahead and blend it up. So a garnish that I love to add to this dish are pickled grapes, which sounds really unusual. Usually you just wanna eat your grapes fresh and whole. However, adding a little bit of white balsamic and some sugar, some honey, will make them even sweeter, add some acidity to this dish that is very much needed. So we're gonna go ahead and get that started. The buttermilk borscht is something that I would have growing up at my local Florida Jewish deli, and my grandmother would take me to on really hot days. So this is obviously a much more like refined version of that. I'm sure the version I had growing up was more just beets and buttermilk or yogurt. But this is a very special version of it. Okay, so we're gonna start making our pickled grapes. I have some whole red grapes here. You can use green grapes as well, or when grapes come into season at the farmer's market, I highly recommend grabbing some seedless grapes in all different varieties. You can make a huge batch of this, let it sit in your fridge for a month, and you could just pick at them from the jar or use them on meats, fishes, whatever you'd like. Obviously, we're gonna use it for our borscht today. So I'm going to grab my pot and I'm gonna add my vinegar. I like to use white balsamic vinegar. So white balsamic I think is really overlooked. A lot of people just use regular balsamic. This has a really lovely sweetness to it. And my spices, I have cinnamon stick, bay leaf, and peppercorn. We're gonna go ahead and bring that to a boil as well. And we're gonna wanna keep an eye on the pot just to stir the sugar, make sure it all gets dissolved into the vinegar. I think what I'm most excited about with second generation are home cooks developing their own traditions through this book. These are recipes that took on a different form for me growing up, and they evolved once I became a chef, and I used these recipes at my own celebrations, and I'm hoping that home cooks will adapt them to be their own. At the end of the day, when I come home from working at Augie's counter, I'm very tired and usually don't have the will to cook, but I think there is something also really nurturing and comforting about just even putting up a small pot of pasta or making something as easy as some cooked beets. I think the simple things kind of inspire me and keep me going. So I think that's important for the home cooks to remember that you don't always have to create something like incredibly complicated. It can be just the act of simplicity and making something for your partner or yourself. All right, so we're gonna get ready to pickle our grapes. We have this really beautiful tall jar that has this nifty contraption in it that you can use to just pull up everything and strain your liquid, which reminds me I should probably get one of these for my home. Go ahead, take the grapes and fill the jar up maybe like halfway, a little bit more than halfway. So our sugar is pretty much dissolved into our vinegar and our spices. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn this off. And I'm gonna pour this right over the grapes. Ideally, you're gonna wanna let this sit for 24 hours just to really make sure that it picks up all the flavor. I'm gonna go ahead and cover this, and I can let this sit out at room temperature just for a little bit, and then I'll go ahead and stick it in the fridge. And it's a quick pickle. All right, so our beets are finished cooking. They're nice and tender, as are our shallots. So we're gonna go ahead and blend this up until it's nice and smooth. We'll pass it and then add our buttermilk to it. And if you don't have a VitaPrep for this, you can always use a regular blender. Just make sure you have like a chinois or a sieve or some cheesecloth to pass it through. So we've gone ahead and blended up the beets. They're a beautiful purple, fuchsia, whatever color you want to call this. And we're gonna go ahead and strain it. And then we're also going to add our buttermilk to it and season it. Something I actually wanted to mention was we added red wine vinegar to this, but you can add any flavored vinegars that you have in house. Also, grocery stores now sell tons of different flavored vinegars. When in spring season, I like to make a chamomile vinegar and a lovage vinegar, and I'll use that in place of the red wine. All right, so we wanna go ahead and strain the borscht just to get out all the little pieces. It'll make it a bit more of an enjoyable drinking experience. And at this stage, you're going to want to, if you're gonna be serving this the next day or in a few hours from now, you'll wanna go ahead and just pop this in the fridge and chill it Adding your buttermilk will be last minute before serving it to your guests. I think one recipe that I really would love for home cooks to try is the palatine, which is actually a dessert. And it's something my grandmother used to make for me. They're Hungarian crepes. And you can fill them with cheese and chocolate sauce and caramel, and you can get the entire family involved in it. And it's just one big party. So while it's a very simple dish, it's something that has a place in my heart. So I hope it finds its way into everyone else's kitchen. If you can't find whole fat buttermilk, you can also use yogurt. You can use a Greek yogurt. Just make sure it's all full fat. So this is nice and delicious. So I wanna make sure that my seasoning is correct and balanced. So I'm just gonna taste a little bit of this. I'm gonna add a little bit of salt. And you can also amp up the acidity in this and add some more of that red wine vinegar, as well as the, or chamomile vinegar, whatever you're using, even maybe a splash of the white balsamic vinegar from the grapes, and just repurpose that. And I like to transfer any liquids that I'm gonna portion out into a bowl or even a cup. I like to use a deli cup because they're incredibly pliable and they make great, they make pouring easy. And again, you're just gonna turn red, so lean into that. And something that I actually just wanted to mention was about the vinegar. When you're seasoning, again, make sure that your vinegar and your buttermilk gets added at the very end. Otherwise, your vinegar will curdle the buttermilk as it sits for a prolonged period of time and will create kind of lumps in the soup. So make sure it's very last minute right before you serve. Now we're gonna cut our pickled grapes. You can, if they're small enough, you can leave them whole. I like to have them just because they look pretty on the inside, right on top. And then if you have some really great finishing olive oil, I'll just top it off there. Kind of creates this lava lamp effect, which I really love. That's it, voila. I don't have a really great catchphrase, but it would probably be voila. Okay, so we've completed our chilled buttermilk borscht. My hands are thoroughly red, as is my mouth. And I hope that you enjoy making it as much as I do and bringing it to your home with your families or your partners. And you can go ahead and find the recipe in my upcoming cookbook, Second Generation, which is being published on September 17th. And I'm very proud of her. So enjoy.